The verse of the day is Genesis 2:2, and it says, "On the seventh day, God had finished his work of creation, so he rested from all his work." Something that I think is so funny is the more we go through the beginning scriptures and the beginning of creation, the more you start to see what things we're living in today that started in the beginning of time. Like, we live in a 7-day week. God created things on day 1 through 6 and then rested on the 7th day. What do we do on our 7th day most often? Go to church, have a day of rest. I just think it's so interesting how everything goes back to God because it came from him. So on the 7th day, God rested. That's a pretty bold statement because God didn't need rest. He wasn't tired, but he rested and put this in the Bible for a reason, to communicate to us the importance of rest, the importance of reflecting on our work, the importance of highlighting that we all should be working in some capacity, creating in some capacity, because we were made to do that. Going back to yesterday's verse, we were made in the image of God. What was the first thing God did? Create the heavens and earth. If we were made in the image of God and the first thing God did was create something, I think that communicates to me that all of us in the world were made to create in some capacity. Verse 3 says, "And God blessed the 7th day and declared it holy, because it was a day when he rested from all his work of creation." The 7th day was declared holy. And in the next book, which is Exodus, Moses gives the 10 commandments, and one of the 10 commandments is having a day of rest, is having a Sabbath. So again, we see the importance that God is trying to highlight. You all need to rest. You all need rest. If I rested, you need it as well. The statement that God declared it holy communicates to me that rest is holy. And the reason why rest is holy is because it's in the rest, it's in our quiet time with God that we really grow in relationship, that we build connection with God, because most often we see rest as being still, right? And when we're still with God, we grow with him. Our spirit gets filled up. Our spirit gets energized. We're not as distracted, because the devil's main scheme is to get us to be distracted so that we don't pay attention to what God is saying or doing in our lives. If he can get us to be busy and distracted and never taking a minute to rest and to be still, then we're never going to learn the practice of being present. And God speaks in the present moment. So that's how the enemy is going to prevent us from hearing God's voice clearly, or make us believe that we don't know how to follow God's voice clearly because we're always distracted and busy. I was reading about this verse earlier today, and I learned something new. I didn't realize that the commandment of rest isn't in the New Testament, and all the other 10 commandments are. So a lot of people argue, well, do we still have to have a Sabbath today? Because in Exodus, we read about the 10 commandments. In Exodus 20:10, it says, "But the 7th day is a Sabbath day of rest, dedicated to the Lord your God. On that day, no one in your household may do any work." I think one of the reasons why a Sabbath day isn't mentioned in the New Testament is because Jesus is rest. Relationship with Jesus is rest. And if we follow the greatest commandment that's repeated in the Gospels, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, that's number one. And then as equal as that is loving your neighbor as yourself. Those are our 2 rules now. And I think it's interesting how the 10 commandments, every single 10 commandment falls in line with both of those things. Every single 10 commandment either connects to loving God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, or loving your neighbor as yourself, because the first half of the 10 commandments are in relation to God, and the second half are in relation to people, your neighbor. So if you follow the commandment, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, you're going to hit the first 4 10 commandments. And if you love your neighbor as yourself, you're going to hit the last 6 10 commandments. A verse that speaks to the Sabbath in the New Testament is Colossians 2:16 through 17. And it says, "So don't let anyone condemn you for what you eat or drink, or for not celebrating certain holy days, new moon ceremonies, or Sabbaths." The message here is those things don't qualify your salvation, don't save your soul. The only person that can do that is Jesus, is believing in Jesus. And it's through that belief in Jesus that he gives you rest for your soul. the rest will come because the Holy Spirit gives you that rest. And then it's in you prioritizing relationship with God that you're going to set aside time to be still, to rest from work, to prioritize rest, because you're going to start to see that rest with God births everything else, births blessings. You're going to start to see that blessings flow from rest because it's you being still with God. The more you're still with God, the more you're listening. The more you're listening, the more you know what to do, the more you get revelation about what God is instructing you to do, about who you are, about who He is. So your connection is going to get stronger, and you're going to have that much more joy and peace and all of the fruit of the Holy Spirit overflowing from your heart, which is going to make you feel strong and full of rest. So you might be thinking, okay, well, you said God prioritized rest, so we should rest, but now you're saying it's not a commandment. What is it? I would say nothing qualifies your salvation aside from Jesus, but rest is so important. So it's not something that you should feel condemned by in terms of, oh no, I didn't take a Sabbath, but it's something you should absolutely prioritize every day. And I think it's good to have a full day dedicated to rest and to unplug and to allow yourself to have that reward of a week well worked. So how can I apply this verse to my life? Prioritize rest. Choose a day where you can fully unplug and rest from your work, and see that rest is holy, that it actually does more for you when you are still, because it forces you to let God be when you're not doing. When we rest, we stay in alignment with God, because Jesus is rest for our soul. When we grow in relationship with Jesus, that's rest for our soul. And prioritizing that every morning is going to refuel you and prepare you to take on the day and give you the strength necessary to take on your day. Okay?